All right, welcome everybody. Happy to see you all here. Certified Photo Training Weekly Review. We did shadows this last week, and I want to review some of these imageries with you and know that we've been a little bit busy here in the back end of things. And so, what I typically do is I go over here to Weekly Photo Challenge and I go through here and I download everybody's files. But after that, I go into the discussion. And then I go through here and I look for anybody who didn't actually have the option to tag the post topic. So if I do miss you, I sincerely apologize for that. Please forgive me. I do like to really do these weekly reviews because I think a lot of people learn a lot, and I think a lot of people learn from each other, which I think is extremely great. So that's why I really like doing these. But I do like to try to shorten them up a little bit. Sometimes they get a little long, so I'm going to try to keep my monologues a little bit shorter. So with that said, let me get rid of Facebook here and minimize that. And excuse my desktop here. I'm in the middle of cleaning some stuff up, so if you see a mess on there. First image that comes up here, we're seeing a photograph by Heather Ann called Into the Light. She's at f11 at 1/25th of a second at ISO 200. Now, the first thing that jumps out to me right away, now, I want everybody to know this, is the first thing that jumps out to me when I look at any imagery is their ISO. Okay? So, with ISO, it should be your main priority most of the time. Now, when I say most of the time, it's usually 80-90% of the time. There's always rules to be broken. And with that said, with photography, you do want to learn the rules, but then you want to break them. Okay? So, with that said, when I'm looking at this image here, it does look a little blurred. And I think the reason why it's a little blurred is because you're at 1/25th of a second. And you got to imagine 1 second broken up into 25 parts, and one of those parts is the duration of the amount of time that your camera is open to allow light in. Okay, so you're at 1/25th of a second. Now, when you're photographing foliage or trees or any kind of plant or anything, really anything that's movable by the wind outside, you can often and most often will get a blur from the slow shutter speed. Okay, so and the reason being is during that 1/25th of a second, although it sounds really fast, it's actually relatively slow in photographic terms. Okay, so when you're set up like this and say you're shooting at 1/25th of a second and the wind blows and the leaves are going all over the place, well, your camera is going to pick that up. Okay, your camera is going to pick up that wind. Well, not so much the wind, but it's going to pick up the blur of the leaves from the wind. Okay, so if you were to speed up your shutter speed up here a little bit, maybe 1/25th of a second, that would be about where I would be, is 1/125th of a second, and I would have been at 100 ISO. And then I would have adjusted my aperture accordingly. Okay, now I'm lacking to see a focal point here, and that could be because there is blur from the leaves. Okay, with that said, it's a really creative vision. I really like the rule of thirds here with the vanishing point here coming from the branches. And if you've been following the group for long enough, you do know that you got to watch out for these splotchinesses like this, because you can't have you have to expose for one or the other. Okay, so you have to expose for the highlight or the shadow. And here we're getting a little bit of a mix. And this is telling me that Heather was on probably 3D matrix metering, which kind of confused the camera a little bit. So let me know, Heather, whether or not you are shooting on manual or some sort of priority mode. Because it looks indicative of that. Other than that, sometimes you want to avoid this kind of lighting just because it's so splotchy. Again, remember what I just said a little bit ago, though. Although most of the time this splotchiness of light will be a problem to your photographs, you can use it to your advantage. most notably, I watched Ashley do this with her self-portrait a few weeks ago, where she nailed this splotchiness on her, which made it look fantastic. And you can use this splotchiness to really add dimension and depth, but you got to do it the right way. And the other thing that I'm seeing here, a little critique here, is this little really bright highlight. So you're missing your exposure here a little bit, and that's to be expected because you've got shadows, midtones, highlights, bright sun that's confusing your camera a little bit, etc., etc. So, you could easily have shot in this in a different way at a different time of day where maybe the light is more evenly lit inside of the trees. Now, that's what makes shutter speed so beautiful, is because you could literally wait till, damn near dusk and go ahead and just use a really long shutter speed if the wind isn't blowing. You see what I'm saying? When the wind blows with a long shutter speed, you're going to get blurred with the leaves. So with that said, let's go ahead and move on to the next one. Now, this image. I really like this image here. So let me just look over it for a second. We've got Weekly Photo Challenge, 5.6, 24 millimeter, ISO 400, 1/400th of a second. All right, so, doing these weekly reviews is almost like a little bit of a detective game. You look at your settings, you look at the clues, and you decipher what they were doing. I'm assuming here what was going on was you're probably handheld Verity. You're probably handheld at 24 millimeter, and the composition is fantastic. I really like this composition, and I really like the starkness from the highlight to the shadow here. To me, that adds a lot of contrast, and with contrast creates depth and dimensionality. And you've all heard me say this before. You want to create the three-dimensional world into a two-dimensional image, and you do that in the way that Verity did here by doing highlights to shadows, okay? But you do need to pick a specific area to expose for, okay? And with that said, most often, you're going to want to expose for the highlights, okay? That's going to give you a split exposure like this, but we're playing with shadows this time, so that actually works really well, okay? With that said, let's look a little bit deeper into this image. I may have worked on, in this Verity, this is, I like to nitpick a lot, and that's why we do these. This line is slightly crooked, and that's indicative of being at 24 millimeter. So you could very well have gotten a similar shot if you would have stood back quite a distance and zoomed in a little bit more, and then watched your edge lines. And when I mean edge lines is you want this edge to line up parallel with your actual line like this. You see what I'm saying there? So, not that really matters here, but just keep that in mind. Keep that in the back of your mind for future reference. You do want to make sure your lines are straight, and most especially a horizon line. Now, talking about getting lines straight, okay, that doesn't mean that you tilt your camera. Okay, that means that you move your physical body in order to square up to the line that you want to straighten. Okay, I often see a lot of amateur photographers out there tilting their cameras to try to get the line straight, and I just want to tell them that you guys, you've got to move your body. You got to move your body in your physical position out in space. Okay. I want to start talking about out in space a little bit more because it's really important. You got to imagine, where are you out in space, and where is your subject out in space? Okay? And more importantly than you and your subject is, where is the light source out in space? So it's a triangular method. Okay? So where are you? Where's your subject, and where's your light source? Okay, light source here being the sun, which looks like it's up to my top right hand side here, And so just keep that in mind that it's a triangulation method, and that's not to be confused with the exposure triangle. Okay, so triangulation method, it really is all about, a beginner photographer will only focus on themselves, okay, and what they're doing. Okay, an intermediate photographer will focus on themselves and their subject. Okay, an advanced photographer will focus on the light source first and work their subject and themselves around that light source. Okay, hopefully that's making sense, because that's a really good point that I have been somehow I've been escaping my mind lately when I'm trying to teach photography, because as we all know, photography is all about light, and your light source is most definitely the most important thing that comes into play. You might think composition, you might think posing, you might think rule of thirds, framing, blah, blah. No, all of it comes down to the light. Okay, you cannot see anything without light. And in going deeper into that thought process is, if there wasn't any light, you wouldn't see anything at all. So what you're actually seeing is light being reflected off of a surface. And once you start to understand that light reflects off of a surface, and not only does it reflect off of a surface, but it bounces around. I mean, it bounces all over the place. And training your eye to see that sort of thing really goes a long way in photography. And that's what we do. That's what we do in our Frame Your Future course, is really hone in and how light reacts and how it reflects, okay? Because you need to be able to train your eye to see the exposure value difference between, say, this highlight and this shadow here, okay? This highlight and shadow, this exposure value here and this shadow exposure value here could be very different, okay? So you want a meter for whatever it is you're planning to accomplish. And like I said, most oftentimes you're going to want a meter for the highlight area, just so you're not blowing out your highlights. I know all of you have seen that before, where you see a photograph or a portrait of somebody, and that photographer had actually exposed for the shadows, which brought the brightness up, which increased the brightness of their skin, which made their skin look pure white and really blown out and unattractive, okay? Making sense? Alright, this image. I really liked it. I'd love to see this image come through, because this is a great play on shadows, and it's a great play on keeping your lines straight. Now, let's go ahead and look at our lines here. So I like to bring on my crop tool to look at my lines and measure up my horizon line. So you're seeing here, you are seeing a little bit of a miss here. You could have tilted your camera a little bit. And we were just talking about tilting your camera versus moving your body. The further the distance away the line is, the more able you are to turn your camera versus moving your body. Okay? Hopefully that makes sense. With that said, this is a gorgeous photo, especially taken from an iPhone. Okay? The sunset, beautiful. The togetherness of the family. I mean, this is something you should put on your wall. Coming down to limiting distractions. In these weekly reviews, I like to give a little preview of Photoshop. What I like to do, and this is my own opinion, this is my own personal preference, and my opinion has carried me a long way in this business. When you have a powerful image like this, you do want to take into consideration all the distractions that may pull your eye away from what's important in the image, okay? So what do I mean by that? Okay. What I mean by that is this right here could go. You see what I'm saying? Like, this could go away. This doesn't need to be here. And the more that you remove distractions away from your photographs, sure, it's just a minor change, but it goes a long way to bring your human visual perception onto your subject to where you want it to be. Okay? Making sense? Alright. With that said, I mean, there's not much else to say more about this photograph because it's so great. Okay. I would have loved to see this shot with a DSLR just because you're talking about an iPhone that has a flat lens versus a DSLR or a mirrorless camera that has a rounded lens that's meant for high definition optics. Okay, so that is one of the main differences between phone cameras and DSLRs and high grade cameras is the optics. Okay. Moving on from there, Paula, hi, love this. I'm going to sit here and analyze this for a moment while I take a drink. Now, Paula, she's in my class, and she knows how important ISO is to image quality. And she also knows how important the time of day is, okay? And so, I know a lot of you, and I do it all the time, and all of us have experienced this in the past, is if you photograph at the wrong time of day, sure, you'll get a great exposure on whatever your subject is, but your sky will be completely blown out because it's way brighter up here than it is down here, okay? So, excuse me. If you actually, and I'm gonna guess that this is early morning, but I'm not sure. It could be late evening. I think it's early morning. Okay. I really love the symmetry here. The symmetry is really working for me here. And you can see that straight down the middle like that. And then another thing that really jumped out to me on this image, Paula, is the timing of the bird. Okay, I've played this game a lot. Okay, timing of the birds can go a long way because it helps to tell the story. Okay, people love to see the movement. They love to see the movement and feel the story and invoke emotion. And that's what this photograph does here. You got that deep, rich blue sky. Perfect exposure on the building. You got this little stark shadow going on here. And then, I would like to see more color definition down here. And that could be done in post-production. But you guys know me by now. And I'm not a huge fan of altered photographs. I really like to stick to the realism part of things. But you go ahead and you do you. Because people's opinions change, and I like to clarify my opinions versus facts, okay? So you could easily go ahead and do that, Paula, like I taught you in our class, is go ahead and bump up, go up to layer, go up to layer, make an image adjustment in vibrance, bring your vibrance up, go back up to layer, add layer mask, and then hide all mask, and then paint in. Like, literally paint in. You'll literally be painting in with a brush different colors like this. And you can do it. This is just red. I'm just pointing in red right now. I'm not doing a vibrance adjustment, but you can do that in such a way where you can make the viewer's eyes dance around even more. Okay, you see what I'm saying? So, for instance, let's just start over on this one so I can show you. Let's just put this one into play real quick, just because I love this image so much. So, what we can do here is go up to new adjustment layer, go to vibrance, and what we're gonna do is just jack up this vibrance super high, okay, all the way. All right. We're gonna go back over to layers and look at our vibrance layer, okay. But then what we're going to do is go over to layer, go to layer mask, and delete it, okay? And then we're going to add it again, okay? And we're going to hide all this time, all right? Now what we're going to do, now we have our vibrance adjustments that is hidden, okay? You can't see it yet until I click with my mouse, okay? When I click with my mouse, it will continue to add that vibrance adjustment. And I'm just going to, when you guys watch me do these, this is haphazardly just so that, just time constraints, if that makes sense to you. You can add vibrance all over the place and will help your viewer's eyes dance around the image and give you more depth, okay? So what did I do there? Sure, it didn't look like a huge change, but watch what happens when I actually go with the previews back and forth. I want you to watch through here, through that yellow brick. You see that? Let me zoom in on it a little bit. You see that difference? That might seem like a little bit of a difference, and it is a little bit of a difference because we are on a Facebook compressed file, but on a high resolution JPEG or a high resolution RAW file in Lightroom, that can go a really long way. You make your viewers' eyes dance around with vibrance, and then you make your viewers' eyes dance around with the shadows, and you've got a perfect image. Okay? Hopefully you got this. So far, this is the best demonstration so far because I feel like you guys can see that visually. Okay, and it's hard to do Photoshop adjustments on low res files because it really doesn't give you the same impact if it was the full color quality that it would be in a RAW file or in a JPEG file. But you know, in essence, your goal is to get your viewers' eyes to dance around your image, okay? And that's what's happening here. And then you catch the bird in flight, and it's perfect. All right, Misty. I see you like Pokemon. I see a Mewtwo in there. I really like the storytelling going on here. Curious if you're into Smash Brothers at all. Let me look at your didn't get out shooting, so we've got some toys to make some shadows. Photoshop to put a vignette and filter on 51 point. Alright. I've been watching you do these kind of shots a lot, and I really like them, and I think it's super unique. What I'm seeing here is a lack. What I'm seeing here, Misty, is that you're actually focused on the background. Okay? And I could be wrong. I could be wrong on this one. It's tough to make those decisions on Facebook compressed files. But what I'm seeing here is a sharpness on the wall instead of a sharp edge around your characters. Now, that may or may not be true, but I love the vignette too. The vignette works. Now, vignettes are they're a little old-fashioned. But they're coming back now if you do it in the right way. And in this way, it worked really well, okay? Because it really brings the focus into what's happening. Because I literally feel like Mewtwo is about to fight, I don't know what Pokemon character this is, but I know Mewtwo. And then, you know, little distractions, Misty. I know you got Photoshop. Little distractions like this. You could easily go over to your clone stamp and go ahead and clone that out. You see what I'm saying? Oof, that didn't even look good. And these are the little distractions that you might not think is a big deal, but I want you to imagine, like, you know, if you're doing one task 100 times and it takes you 5 seconds and you suddenly found a way to do it in half the time, how much time did you just save? Okay? So little things go a long way with pulling the attention to your subject, okay? With that said, not much else to say here. You're at 400 ISO. You know ISO, so you're good to go. Now, I brought this image up because I really like Sharon a lot, and I know this wasn't her weekly challenge entry, but I really like this image a lot because she's playing with masking a lot, and this image tells a unique story to me, okay? It's like, why is this cat on the moon? You know, and the little scary pumpkin over here, and the moon over here, and oh, the cat's on the moon, but the moon's also back here. So this is creative storytelling and creative compositing. This, Sharon, blew me away. Although you could have been better on your masking edges, you know? You see what I'm saying? Like around here? Like you could have cut that out nicer. But with that said, the creativity here blew me away, okay? That's why I brought this one up, even though it's not even part of the weekly photo challenge, okay? I really, 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 really like this, and I would love to see you keep doing stuff like this, okay? All right, Andrew, let's see what you got. All right, we're at 100 ISO. That's good. You're on a tripod. You're at 1/6 of a second. That's good. You're at 22. Now, there's a little bit of a misconception about high apertures. Yes, I shoot at f/22 all the time. Okay, I shoot at 16, 22, 32 sometimes. But there are sweet spots to your lenses, okay? And it will depend on what lens you have, whether it's a prime lens, whether it's a zoom lens, so on and so forth, okay? So with that said, you do want to watch out for that a little bit. Not that this is deterring your image in any way whatsoever. One thing I like, again, this is my opinion, one thing I like is simplicity, okay? So what you've got going on here is a little bit too much for my liking. Now, tell me to screw off if you want. I don't care. But for my liking, it's a little bit too much going on. Okay. I think what you could have done here is shot at a much lower aperture, like 2.84, and got a really precise focal point right here. Let's see if I can marquee that. And get a really precise focal point right there, okay? Sit on your tripod, be real still, and what that would do would blur this background here, giving that definition here and on your shadow point here, which you are going for. With that said, this is a fantastic image. Again, everybody, I'm going to continue to try to make everybody better. So don't feel bad if I knock any images down whatsoever, because I do it with love, okay? Know that I'm doing it with love, and I want to help everybody, okay? With that said, there's really not much else to say about this image, Andrew. You're beyond intermediate, going on to advanced, possibly pro, man. You're getting there. All right, Carolyn, come on. Carolyn, she's sandbagging all these contests. All right. Let's talk about all the greats of this, because there's no cons to this. This shadow gradient behind the screw, fantastic. I love the angle of it. I love the directionality of it. I love the inquisitiveness of how did you get that. How I keep wanting to call it a nail, but it's a screw. How did you get that to stay still? Did you actually set it up right? Or did you drill it in? Or what did you do there? This is fantastic. If I were to nitpick this one in any way, shape, or form, I would probably say to do this. I would probably bring the head of the nail slightly higher. Let me switch over to my square marquee. And let's just crop it down so I can show you. And the rule of thirds working perfectly. Carolyn, you're just really, really good. I would more like to see it like that. Okay, you see what I'm saying? It's similar to like headroom in a portrait. Wherever your focal point is, you do want to leave some extra room on top. And then the directionality of the shadow here, I mean, this is just excellent. Excellent work. Excellent work. A+. And you know that. You know that. I know you know that. Let's get rid of my iMessage. And we got Carolyn again. Let's close that one up. And looks like I got a couple of extra opened ones. And now we got Shane coming up. And I'm trying to decipher what this is exactly. Is this some sort... It looks like maybe a wine glass? Or something like that? I really like the highlight that you've got going on here. Now, I want everybody to watch this. I want everybody to watch this, okay? Now, I'm going to start with the bad, okay? The color is off a little bit. Your white balance is off a little bit, but who cares, okay? You can fix that later. What's really great about this is you've got this highlight edge here, and it's really sharp, and then it's juxtapositioned behind the darkness So where does your eye go immediately when you look at this image? If you were just to flash this image right past you really quick, what would you remember first? Well, you would see this immediately because that's what the human eye does. Okay? It's drawn to highlights. Okay? The human eye is drawn to highlights. And shadows is highlights' little sister. Okay? Don't forget about the shadows. Okay? Because, I'm going to tell you why. If you can emphasize your shadows, since the human eye is so drawn to highlights, if you can master shadows, you can make those highlights pop out even more. Okay? Making sense? And that's what Shane did here, and that's why this image is so excellent. Okay? 1/3 of a second, f5. Yeah, with that said, you could probably have shot at a higher aperture here, Shane. I would have probably dropped this on a tripod. And if you were on a tripod, there's no reason you should have been at 200. I would have dropped this on a tripod, then more like f8, and then balanced my exposure that way and spot metered for this specific area. But again, this is nitpicking, everybody. This is a fantastic image, and I'm a nitpicker, all right? And that's why you're listening, okay? All right, friends. Let's see what you got here again, bud. All right, so 200 again. You don't need to be at 200 here. You could definitely be at 100. Now, if you weren't on a tripod, I could understand an ISO of 200 in order to get a faster shutter speed so you don't get motion blur. Now, this image is a little hard to decipher just because it's low res, you know? You feel me, Francis? Like, it's low res. What I'd like to see is more detail here. Now, there's a big misconception about image stacking here. Now, not that this has anything to do with this, but I just had a debate with somebody about image stacking, about focal lengths and focal planes. Your focal plane is way out in space, okay? You're focusing on the moon, okay? So, regardless of whatever aperture you're at, you're going to be sharp, okay? So what you really need to focus on is ISO and making sure you're not bumping your tripod or getting any sort of motion shake. Now, looking at this image, I am seeing now this again. It's hard with these weekly reviews, everybody. If I had all of your images in front of me at high resolution, I could definitely do this more effectively. So know that some of these things that I'm saying may not be totally true. See what I'm saying? Like, because it's hard to decipher a compressed image that has, was 10 megabytes and now is 300 kilobytes. Okay? So with that said, this image could go through a sharpening process. And this is probably indicative of using probably a non-prime lens. And probably, I think you said you use a 70 to 300, which makes sense. Which is fine, man. I mean, don't get hung up so much on sharpness and all the tactics of all of that, because you did a great job here. I mean, you can see all the detail. I just would like to see a little bit more detail. You see what I'm saying? And you can get a little bit more detail by dropping your ISO down to 100 and then... finding your sweet spot of your lens, which is probably somewhere between f8 and f11. And then, and I really love the waning gibbous here. And that's a great play on the shadows, which was the weekly challenge this week. And so, with that said, man, that's about it. Like I said, we had a crazy week this week, as you all know. So with that said, let's go ahead and wrap this one up because we're at about 35 minutes, and that's about where I like to keep them. I feel like when we go an hour long, one, my voice box goes out, and two, I think people lose interest and they drop off. So with that said, I hope you guys enjoyed this. We'll be announcing the next challenge in the next couple of days. As you watch this, make sure you subscribe to my YouTube channel if you feel like you want to. If you don't want to, I honestly don't care. But go ahead and tell your friends. Tell your friends about all this. The weekly reviews and let them know about our course and everything like that. So hopefully you enjoyed this, and we'll be announcing the next challenge soon. And if you have any ideas for the next challenge, go ahead, drop them in the comments. I appreciate it. Thanks.